This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you for
Perfect.
joining the Toadstool and DonnaRae Menard for presenting her book, Murder in the Meadow. And we welcome you guys for taking time out of your day and enjoying this little presentation with us. Go ahead, Donna.
Hi. I'm thrilled to death to be here. It's a wonderful way to start the new year, to be with other people who like to read and what's going on and talking about something near and dear to my heart, which is writing, it took me a long time to get to this point. I actually started writing when I was in middle school. I was a country kid that ended up having to go to a city school system due to changes in zoning. I no longer could go to school with the kids that I had been in grammar school with and that I knew, and had to go to a more urban school, and I hated it. We were dairy farmers. I got a lot of, ooh, who stinks like a cow, moo, moo, moo sort of stuff. And in desperation and to protect myself, I started writing derogatory descriptions of other kids, especially the cliquey kids that were in my class, the cliquey female kids. The male kids didn't bother me so much. I'm not sure. It may have been because I was bigger than most of them. I'm not sure what. But anyway, I happened to be in a math class, and a teacher by the name of Richard Lagasse, I can absolutely remember this, came up behind me and took my notebook. To teach me a lesson, he made me stand in front of the class and read my description. And when I initially said that I wouldn't, he said he would read them. And I decided that if I was doing it myself, maybe I could tone them down a little bit. It was also the beginning of my lettering in track and field on the 100-yard dash. My training and my lettering, I also learned that I could actually squeeze underneath a parked car and hide. I was really good at climbing trees, but mostly I could just outrun the other kids who were trying to catch up to me, or that were trying to catch me and probably, beat me senseless. After that, I went back and forth. I rode in school a little bit. I had a home economics teacher, Virginia Pelletier, who sponsored a book in my junior year where we all wrote short stories. It was published on the school printing press and available to the parents and stuff like that. That was my first published work. And after that, I did the whole gamut with notebooks and diaries. I had, for a short time, I had every 2 weeks, our local newspaper ran a small article of mine. And I picked up another small newspaper where I was writing 250 or 300 word stories that were printed in the paper. And usually they centered around my big golden. And it was very funny because I would be walking down the street and people would roll the window of their car down and yell, "Hi, Ruger." They had no idea who I was, but they absolutely knew who the dog was. And then time went on, and like most people, I had to get a job and I had a family, and I had books, total manuscripts, handwritten out in notebooks in a couple of banana boxes underneath my bed. And I'm not sure exactly what brought it about, but the gentleman that I was married to at that point stumbled on one of these banana boxes and opened it up and said, "What is this?" And when I explained it to him, he thought it was total garbage, that anybody would even consider to do that. And he took them out back and burned the 2 boxes of books. It was pretty close to the end of my marriage to that gentleman. On April 28, 2008, I was diagnosed with stage 4 squamous carcinoma and given 6 months. I took an experimental drug. I had to live in the hospital for 3 months. I had had no side effects before I was diagnosed, and I had every side effect in the world afterwards. But the gentleman that was the head of my team Dr. Thomas Rowland, said to me, what is in your bucket list that you want to do? And I just had a few things, but one of them was to actually publish a novel. And he challenged me to do that. And when I started recovering a year later, when I was to the point where I could once again consider what I was doing, who I was, I started taking classes online. I started seriously attending book signings and author lectures, and we didn't have Zoom then. Anything that I could do that would get me near somebody who wrote and listened to what they say. And I actually crashed a couple of conventions because conventions can be very expensive. And if I could get to one in the car and be there just for the day, I would just sort of wander in and become part of the wallpaper and attend sessions. So I did that too. I was actually at a convention that I paid for in 2009, which was Crime Bake just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And I met this very tall gentleman, and I was telling him about my 450-pound brood sow and Bonnie to Belle, who most people have, lap dogs. I had a 450-pound lap pig. And she thought she was part of the family. She learned she could let herself in the house if she went to the back door, that it didn't latch really tight and she could figure it out. So I was telling him these stories, and he took me over and introduced me to this woman whose name was Harriet Sachtler. And I was telling her and helping her fold t-shirts for display and stack books. No idea who these people are. The man was Bruce Robert Coffin, who is an author. The woman, Harriet Sachtler, is one of the publishers at Level Best Books. She introduced me to Verena Rose, and they asked me if the pig showed up in a book. And I said, she actually does. I had at that point just finished Murder in the Meadow, that's this book, and was refining it. And she told me when I had it ready, she would like to look at it. And I said, okay, that's fine. And it wasn't until she actually handed me her card so that I knew where to send it, that I knew that I was talking to a publisher. Harriet liked the book because of the pig. Verena liked the book because there are 17 cats in the book. I sent them the book. They liked it. They gave me a 3-book contract for the Katelyn Took series. It's a never too late mystery. The first book, Murder in the Meadow, came out July 9th of 2021. And on June 21st, 2022, Murder on Eagle Drop Ledge will come out, which will be the second installment. It takes place in 1974 in a small town in upper Vermont, below Burlington, but still upper Vermont, very similar to the town that I grew up in. There are some similarities in the book. I grew up in a building that was actually a retired stagecoach hotel. And this Katelyn Took, that's where she lives also, is in a building that is a retired stagecoach hotel with all of the problems that you have in a 100-year-old building like that. I would like to invite you to unmute your mics if you would like to. And if you have any questions, I would be thrilled to answer them. I will read you a little bit at the beginning of the book, and then I'll talk about the participants, the people that are in the book. All right? So this book is dedicated to my pépère, Arthur Fortin, who taught me to love the soil, the animals, and the beautiful farming smell, which got me into so much trouble. Mr. Wilkins, attorney at law and executor for the estate of Irma Moore, paused at the end of the reading of Irma Moore's will. There was one person in his office, Katelyn Took, Miss Moore's only granddaughter. As briefly mentioned in Miss Moore's will, Miss Took, will you Wilkins explained. There is one stipulation to the transfer of Miss Moore's estate to you. There was a shadow of a sneer on his face. The young lady had projected a bored, disdainful facade since her arrival, and he was going to enjoy pouring vinegar on her ice cream sundae. It's pronounced Took, with a long U, not Took, like I stole something. Katelyn gazed across the steel and glass expanse of Wilkins' desk with distaste. Her first impression of Wilkins was overbearing, judgmental, and rude, all capped off with a large dose of he was so important and she was not. Why would my grandmother, after all these years, willingly leave me anything? She asked. It was a question burning in her mind for the entire ride from Illinois to Vermont. She'd left home on bad terms and 10 years later still felt the sting of her grandmother's anger. Katelyn's first reaction to the news of Irma's passing had been a shocker. Irma had made it clear her granddaughter was not a person she could willingly accept. Irma and Katelyn hadn't expected the feeling of loss. She'd had a momentary visual of an astronaut floating in space and the terror when the tether broke, sentencing to an eternity alone. It is not my place to question her motives, said Wilkins. She left a letter. From within the oxblood folder, he withdrew a standard 9 3/4 inch, this'll help, envelope and held it out to Katelyn. In his other hand, he offered a gold-tone letter opening with the raised monogrammed W on the hilt. Katelyn didn't want to accept the envelope, and once it was in her hand, she flipped it over to examine the seal, willing herself to stay in control, though her guts roiled and the only outward show of distress was the tightening of her jaw. Ignoring the pre-offered opener, she slit the flap with her thumbnail. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Holding it below desk level where Wilkins could not see the slight tremble, she read. July 6, 1976. Dear Katelyn, though it may surprise you to receive this missive and the summons to receive it, even as I write these words, I realize this is not how I wanted to do this. Please know that regardless of everything that has happened, you were always greatly loved, both by your mother and myself. Everything I have is yours. Though it is mostly just a patch of dirt, it is what it is. I have only one request, and that is that you not abandon, leave to die, or reject the poor old cats I rescued and shared my last years with. I am asking you to give them a home until their demise, please. There is a voice within the house that will tell the tale. I love you, girl. Yesterday, today, tomorrow, and I will never be far. With all my heart, Graham, Irma Roser Moore. Katelyn folded the letter deliberately, taking her time as she fought to control the sudden rise of tears behind her eyes, initiated by reading the handwritten note. And the stipulation, she finally asked, voice huskier than before. Wilkins, who did not know the letter's contents, said, Ms. Moore had at her death house cats. It was her wish that you provide them with a home until they pass away in a natural manner. And if I don't, asked Katelyn, realizing Wilkins had not known Irma added her own personal appeal to the legal document on the desk. Ms. Moore had a contingency plan which I am forbidden to share with you. The smirk had grown. Well, Katelyn said, Katelyn, who was both unemployed and on the verge of homelessness, shrugged. I like cats. That's good. The smirk was now full blown because there are 17 of them. From there, Katelyn goes to the house, and that's where she finds out by the voice in the house that her grandmother did not pass away of normal circumstances, but was actually ridden down in the back, one of the back fields. And the story goes from there, talking about how she decides whether or not she's going to stay, what she does to find out exactly what happened to her grandmother, and how she solves the mystery of her murder. Katelyn Took ran away from home the day before her 18th birthday. Her mother died of cancer when she was 3. Her father was killed shortly thereafter. He was a long-haul truck driver. He was driving drunk, went off the road and died. She has 2 older brothers who a family member in Illinois took to raise. They would not take Katelyn. Katelyn was raised by her grandparents, her grandmother and her grandfather. When her grandfather passed away, she had a lot of issues with her grandmother, and that's why she left there. It is always also a story about a young girl whose sexuality is not something that she can talk about in the small town that she lives in, and her search for someone to love her, her inability to recognize people who already do, and how best to deal with them or how to share her life with them. A lot of people have asked me, are these all people in your life? And there are incidents in my life, things that happened to me that are in the book. One of them being the setting, another one being the house. The fact that for a while when we were in high school, I had a cousin and I worked for the town catching stray cats. And we were paid for every one that we picked up. And I don't think that we ever bothered to mention to them that we went right back out and let the same cats out again so we could catch them again. And I'm sure that the statute of limitations on that has passed, so I don't mind saying anything about it. There are some, I'm a people watcher. I will sit someplace and just watch people walk by, and I do write a short descriptive of what they look like. And then I imagine who they are on the inside, what their lives are like, what they do. And when I create a character, I mash multiple descriptions together to come up with the person who fits in the role that I need them to be in. Very often we talk to people and they are interested in how you sit down and you actually put together the writing process. And I think that can be a little daunting to some people. It was very daunting to me when I first started researching real writers and looking to see what they were doing, how authors got to the point where they were actually authors. And you would see somebody who had this name and it had all of these initials after it, PhD, DCYS, whatever, FACT, and I had nothing. I had nothing to put out there except who I was. And I had a lot of life skills. I worked around a lot of times. I didn't work in the same profession my whole life. And I was always a people person, so I collected people. I was rural, I was urban. Currently, I am living in just outside of town at a place where people are perfectly willing to drive through and put their dog or throw cats out the window or however they get in my yard, and I find them in the morning. And I have gotten cats, dogs, 2 white rats, a pig, and some other strange sort of critters. Some of which I keep, some I don't. I actually have a cat that we had to shut up here today because as soon as I start working on the computer, she wants to walk back and forth across the keyboard. I'm not sure why. I think she thinks it's her space, but she does that. I have a friend who is also an author, Mark Leachter, that I work with former murders authors on. We do a 4-author panel, 4 different authors who write murder mysteries in 4 different genres: historical, cozy, police procedural, and terror, I guess, is the last one. So we all write the same thing, but in a different manner. And he is very meticulous. He always starts with pencil and paper and then moves to computer. And he has to have a specific paper and he has a specific type of pen that he works with. And I will use whatever's handy. If I'm sitting in front of the laptop, I use that. If I'm driving, I use a tape recorder. If I'm sitting down watching the television, or I'm sitting in a meeting someplace, I always have a notebook and pencil with me. I get up in the middle of the night, I make notes. I was at one point traveling and on a bus system, and went into the ladies' lavatory and came out with a roll of toilet paper and spent the next couple hours on the bus writing down this roll of toilet paper and re-rolling it as I went along. So I'll use whatever I can pretty much come up with. Some people have to, I'm a pantser. I write by the seat of my pants almost exclusively. There are people who will set up enormous plot lines. I was listening the other day to an author who was talking about a 400-page book that he wrote. And before he got started, he had a 145-page outline to work from. And I was like, oh my God, that's practically a book. Why would you write all that if you're not, why don't you just write the book? And I write as I go along. I do not necessarily write in a straight line. I do recognize 3 points in the book. Once upon a time, the middle of the book, and they lived happily ever after, more or less. I might write in the middle. I might write for a while in the front. I might write a scene here and a scene there and a scene. And then I shuffle them like cards and put them all together. And for me, that's where it gets exciting. When I know that I have the whole book, and even though I don't have pages 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I can put them together until I have, pages that work in a line that go down. Then I read it and, move the timeline around the way that I want to. I have other people read them. I go to my beta readers. Every now and then somebody will say to me, well, how come she's having this conversation with this guy she hasn't met for another 15 pages? So that's why you have other people read your work, so that they can correct these little idiosyncrasies that you have done. I actually wrote a book one time where I had an ending, about 2 chapters, that I just had this ending. And I had to write a book to go with the ending because that's what I wanted. Usually I did standalones. With Murder in the Meadow, I really like Katelyn Took. She's 27 years old. She considers herself to be a professional couch renter. In other words, she doesn't really own a home. She didn't seem to have or rent an apartment. She didn't seem to ever find something that she wanted to do. She sort of stumbled into this and stumbled over that. And she's been thrown away by so many people that she just figures she doesn't have a lot of worth. Her whole idea when she found out she inherited this farm, regardless of how dilapidated it was that she was going to sell it. She was going to take the money, go to Hawaii, and party until the money was gone. That was her plan. Not let's save some, let's do this, let's, establish ourselves. This was the way that her life was going. And she found out once that she was back in Parentville that she actually was important to people that were there, to some people that were there, people that she actually didn't meet until she got there. Murder in the Meadow goes from here to Murder on Eagle Drop Ledge, which is a story of her walking the lines of the farm. And she's walking up on the top of a ridge with her newest paramour. And it's in the fall, and they're having a great time, and they stumble on human remains. The next book in the series is Murder in the Orchard, which is the story which circles around someone who has become her very good friend, and that's Ruth Buford, who was accused of killing her husband he was found stabbed to death in their bed in the morning. And she had no recollection of what had happened the night before. And even though she was exonerated, it's something that still holds over her. And it is, Katelyn is looking for redemption for this elderly woman who decided to be her friend and loves her. There is a fourth book, which is not part of this original contract, which is also available if Level Best decides to pick them up. It is not a murder mystery, but it is a mystery that involves Katelyn Took. I'm not sure where I would go from there. I mean, I have other ideas for other books, but it would depend on what is actually going on. I do write in other genres. This is considered a cozy, and I'm sure that most people that read cozies understand what they are. For everybody else, a cozy is a book where a murder can happen, but it happens off the page. So you find out that they find a body, or they know where there's a body, but you don't get all the gory details. You don't see all the blood splatter. You don't see the stabbing. You don't see, it's a fait accompli. And the quest is to solve the mystery. It's usually, cozies are usually amateur detectives. They're people that would live next door to you anywhere you live. There is no cussing in the book. There's no overt sex. There is no harming of animals or children. There are specific stipulations. Caper is a cozy, in my book, is considered a cozy caper. It's a almost falling out of cozy. I don't actually give you the murder scene, but I give you more information about the findings than you would normally get in a cozy. I also write a police procedural, which is Detective Carmine Monsoor, modern day police detective in Boston, Massachusetts. That I had self-published 2 of those books, and now the rest of the series is under consideration by a publisher. So we'll see what goes with that. I got my fingers crossed. I have my first fantasy book, which is The Waif and the Warlord, which is coming out the end of March, published through Metal and Magic Publishing, which is another genre. I have 2 more series in the makings that are cozies. One with a woman who delivers human remains for a living, and another one with a young woman who works in a hardware store and stumbles on an unknown person's remains. And her story is the search for who it is. And in the interim, the search for who actually murdered this woman. So there's writers, even though you may see just this little bit that is on the shelf in the store, there is so much usually happening behind other writers. I find out when I go to conventions or I sit down and I talk to writers, I have in the last few years joined several writers group, that many writers have a lot of different interests. Sometimes they follow them, sometimes they don't. When people ask me how you got into this, it's love of the written word. That's all there is to it. People will come to me and say, have you ever considered writing this? And, sometimes you listen to them and you think, so what you want me to do is you want me to rewrite Peyton Place or something else. But every now and then other people will give you, years ago when I was first getting started, people would come to me and they'd say, I'd like a story with this in it. And I would write them a little short 25,000 word story that had their little bit in it and just give it to them. Just because I like to do it, just because I enjoyed that writing process. From there, I tell people, if you think that this is something that you want to do, start listening. I know on TV, periodically on the television or on the radio, they have writers' shows where they are interviewing writers, and a lot of them are political lately. It just seems to me that a lot of the writers lately have political causes, and which is, to me, the most difficult thing to listen to. But you kind of have to listen to everything and what everybody has to say, and to read, because when you're reading along, you learn, even though you don't realize what you're doing. You learn about the way that people write, the way that people talk. One of my strong points is writing dialect, which is probably easy for me because I love to talk. You know, they talk about writers being inverted. I am definitely not inverted. My grandmother, my earliest memory of my grandmother was her telling me I didn't have to talk to everybody on the city bus. But when you listen to people talk, when you listen to the way a conversation is happening around you, you pick up nuances. And if you're watching them, you get all the little over things that are happening, the looks, the twitches, the stuff that when you put them in the book, excite the reader, because they want to know, not just Susie said this, Johnny said that. What was Johnny actually thinking when this happened? And very often it's the silent signals that tell you that. And the other senses, the idea of the smell of rain, the cow barn smell, the taste of salty French fries or Cajun food or whatever is going on, not in a way to detriment everything else that's going on in the story, but in a way to enhance the story. If you think about incidents that happened in your life, where you took swimming lessons, when you start thinking about those, are you thinking about the smell of the lake or the chlorine smell? Does that come to you at all? If you think about your first dinner date with somebody that you went out with, are you thinking about the smell of the Italian food, the taste of the Italian food, or the pad thai or whatever it was you ate? These are keys. And sometimes if you're trying to get somebody into a conversation that's happening in a fast food place, you give them the smell of French fries and the salty, over-salted taste of the French fry. And for people who eat it a lot in fast food places, that'll kind of take them right there, because you don't really get a choice on putting salt on your French fries. It just comes with it. There's so much other stuff. If you're on a fairgrounds, is it a country fair or a city fair? Can you smell the rising smell of dust? The smell of heat. And if you're down south, there's the humidity, and there's just so much. There's so much. All of your senses should show up in a book. You should be hearing the train go off in the distance, and you should hear the children playing up the street. They're all little 3 or 4 word pieces that can be put into any sentence anywhere along the line that are going to take people to where you are in that particular book. And a lot of times when I write the bare bones. And then when I sit down, I start all over again, and I come through the book, and I want to tell you about the flowering dogwoods. And I want to tell you about the smell in the strawberry fields. And so this padding comes in as you go along. And it's not, I've had people say, well, it's just adding words. You're just trying to get up to 70,000 words or 75,000 words. And it really isn't, because somewhere along the line, you want your book to be more than just pages, words on a page. I want you to know Katelyn Took. I want her to be your friend. I want her to be somebody that you want to sit down and talk with, or maybe have coffee with. But there are other people that in the book that I want you to see them across the street coming towards you and run like a rabbit away from them. So there's stuff that I'm going to tell you about them also that is going to instill into you the fact that these are not good people. These are not people that you want to be around. I very often, when I run into people and they'll ask me what I'm doing, and I start telling them that whatever I'm working on, and people that know me will say, okay, that's it. That's all I need to know until the book comes out, and then there are the poor suckers who are stuck out there that don't know how to tell me to shut up. I think that my partner, Glenn, has probably listened to me discuss this book so many times that he would willingly, have me pick up a different hobby. It wouldn't even matter what it was. But right now, this is where I am, and this is what I like to do. Does anyone have any questions? Can I answer anything for you? I see, Cecilia, your mic is still shut off. So either you don't have one, or which is where I was before I got this laptop, or there she is.
Oh, well, I thank you for this wonderful relating of your experience. Sounds as though you were very lucky to be at the right place at the right time, but I'm sure there was a lot of work behind it as well. So I'm looking forward to getting the book and reading it. But you mentioned that you read, of course, and I was curious as to what's on your bedside table, or what are you reading, or is there a particular genre, or is it eclectic?
Well, I'm actually very eclectic. I will read almost anything. It's kind of like music. If it isn't hard metal, I'm willing to listen to anything music. But it seems that lately on my bedside table are cozies done by people who I am working very often lately. The authors that I'm meeting are more cozy authors. And it's interesting when they start talking to them. I'm pretty interested in the ones that follow a food sort of, a book just recently came out where it happens in a Cajun kitchen restaurant. And everything comes around this Cajun kitchen restaurant. The main crime-baked novel is all about a woman who runs a catering service in Maine, and they do lobster bakes and stuff like that. And I thought, wow, that is really awesome to be able to take a niche like that and develop a whole series, 13 books, the Maine clam bake has. And I'm interested in that, that whole series. Elaine Vetz did 20 some odd books where she would take every year a different hole in the wall job. Washing dogs, doing shampoos in a hair salon, working in a laundromat, where she would take all these absolutely dime a dozen jobs, and she would do these jobs for 6 months. And then she would write a murder mystery around that. And these are what we call the lipstick and high heel books. They're all the cutesy little cozies. Gemma Halliday Publishing puts out the actual lipstick and high heels series, but it's people who take the ABC books. They start at the alphabet, and they A, B, C, they go through them. And I thought, how do you do that? I can't, but for right now, that seems to be where my brain is stuck. I will pick up, I'm really bad. I will pick up an author and I want to read all of them, everything they've done. I want to read, I did that with Elaine Vetz. I was actually traveling, and I was in a laundromat, and there was a counter where there were very dog-eared paperbacks. And the woman said, help yourself. People drop them off. People take them. Help yourself. Just take them. So there were 2 of these books by the same author. So I took, and they were, this is my book. Okay, these are, and the ones they had are what we call airplane paperbacks. They're this big. These Elaine Bet ones are called airplane or airport paperbacks. And I took these 2 little paperbacks and I read them, and I went home, and she had 18 or 20. And I went online and I was looking for them used everywhere. I was, well, you know, I called my local library. They had this one, this one, and this one. I said, put them aside for me. I have to keep a notebook so that I can keep track when I'm doing this, because I get so excited. Skeleton in the Closet, the Skeleton in the Family series is another one, which is, hold on just a second, I'll be right back. Don't leave. So this is the skeleton in the, can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
The skeleton in the, in this, a family skeleton mystery is what it's called. But she, this Lee Perry has 5 of these novels out. My granddaughter read the first one and she said, we need to read these, Nana. Oh, that's the other thing. My granddaughter and I share books. She said, we need to read these. So I said, okay. So I went online and I ordered the other 4 books. And it's like, okay, we need to find something else. So we read all of these. And this one I'm actually rereading. For some reason, this one was the one that really struck me. And I felt like I must have missed something in there. But I was rereading it. But those seem to be right now where my brain is stuck in. I want to, and I can't. People say to me, well, just put it down and read somebody else. I can't. You know, I want to read everything. I want to read the whole thing. I started with Victoria Holt way back when I was a child, reading Victoria Holt books, which is kind of a romance. But they're not a Harlequin style romance. And I read everything that she put out. And then someone told me that she wrote under the name of Phyllis, oh, I can't think of it, Whitney. And I read all of her books. And when I got to the end, I thought there was something wrong. Something had changed in the writing. And I found out that the woman had actually passed. Well, the woman had passed away before I started reading the books. But the woman had passed away and somebody had finished her last few books for her. And you could tell in the difference in the writing. Almost in the middle of the book, the tone changed. You know? So I read everything by Danielle Steele. And then I thought, well, that's pretty cool, but that's not really what I want to write. My grandson and I are big Star Trek, Star War aficionados. So, and now we're watching Boba Fett. So he'll call me up and say, oh my God. So it's to slow him down, because we were going to like 3 movies a week. I made him read the books, read the book. And so we do that, which is kind of how I got into writing the fantasy. The Waif and the Warlord is a book that has a dragon in it. And it's kind of written in days of old, sort of, but also in modern times. It's the closest I'll probably ever get to science fiction. But we wrote the Waif and the Warlord, and I was laughing because I just am waiting for the final galleys to come back on that one so I can check them. And the guy said to me, now about book 2. And I said, no, this is a standalone. This has no book 2. And he's like, yeah, I should have a book 2. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't even think I can deal with it. But so I read everything. I do have a couple of authors that I have met personally that as people, I can't stand them. And it has negatively impacted my reading their books. I don't want to do it. But, you know, people say, oh, did you read this? You know, this, he's a big guy. And I was like, It's really hard to say. I don't want to. I read the news. I read the newspapers. It's amazing the facts you can get out of obituaries. Sometimes it's really cool. And not, I live in a fairly small area right now, so these aren't so good. But if I can get a Boston paper so I can read those obituaries, I really want to do it, because there's really, really interesting information in there. So yeah, right now I just finished the Turncoat's Widow by Marley Wiedemer. And it's a historical cozy. She takes a historical event, a real event, and she follows that person's life as close as possible, but writes about how it could have been, what could have happened, so that you are seeing it through somebody else's eyes, this person's life. And I wasn't really sure about it. I have written 3 historicals where I took a historical time period and wrote a fiction book. But she actually took this woman who was the first female that was ever killed in the electric chair anywhere in the world. And she wrote about this woman's life and how she got there. And right up front, she tells you that the woman was guilty and it's going to happen. You know, but she kind of writes about how she got there. And I wasn't really sure, because it's very much different from what I normally do, but I really enjoyed it. I really did. And I have read a couple of other odd stories that I wasn't sure about. I'm having a problem with some of the Darkling books, the ones where it's the guy isn't like the saboteur or the assassin or something like that. But I think that I have a lot of trouble with them because they're kind of like the Matrix. You know, they come from a place where there's a lot of drugs involved, and not like Dune. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with the Dune series, which happens. It's an off-world. It's a fantasy. And it's like, oh, we won't even go there. But these are stories about people who are crafted to be villains by somebody else through the use of drugs and manipulation. And in the last year, I've read 2 of these and found out that I really don't like these at all. You know, I don't like the idea. It's one thing if you have somebody who is willingly following you into something, and something else if they are not given a choice. So what do you read?
I like mysteries or murder mysteries a lot. But I go off and read whatever comes along that I think, you know, sounds good. So it's very eclectic. I don't do science fiction though. I just don't like science fiction. But there was a series of books, and I don't recall the author. It's Peter something, but set in the Middle Ages, and the individual would solve the murder using what was available at the time, you know, whatever herbs, and I found that interesting. So yeah, basically I read mysteries mostly.
Well, you know, that's a good point that you made, which is Murder in the Meadow is in the mid 70s. And I specifically went to this time period because I did not want my protagonist to have the ability to use a cell phone and a computer and instant figure me out. I wanted her to be able to have to figure out how she was going to do this, how she was going to get there, listen to what was happening around her, and put together what she needed to know. You know, to me, that makes it a good story. It isn't. Right. I've read a couple that I thought they were pretty good stories, but it seems like they were more sex and cell phones than anything else. And it was too easy. It was too easy for them to get to learn what they needed to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why books that are a series of books that I do not care for are books that are into the future. You know, when everything is, they look at you and they can read your mind. Ooh. It's like this the Saturday night late show. You know, it's like, no, this is not the way it's supposed to work. So, but that's really all I have to offer. You know, I am thrilled to death that you dropped in on us today. You can go to my website, DonnaRaeMenardBooks.com, and see what's coming out or what's going to be where. I will be around whenever.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope you have a chance to read Murder in the Meadow.
Oh, I will. I'll make a point of it. I also really like novels that are set in New England, in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine, because, you know, I say, why do they take that road and not that road in order to get there? But, you know, it's nice when you know the area as opposed to something, you know, set in an area that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, it's always funny when somebody comes back and says, I know exactly where that is. I was like, there you go. Yes, there it goes. Well, it looks like they're signaling that we're going to be leaving here in a minute.
Right.
So thank you very much again for coming. I appreciate it. I'm thrilled to meet you.
Thank you very much. I have enjoyed it as well. And as I said, I'm looking forward to reading the book.
Wonderful. Thank you. Elisa, you right there?
Yep. I wanted to thank you both for being here, especially you, DonnaRae. And I did provide a link in the chat room for purchasing the book directly from Toadstool Bookshop and supporting your local indie bookstore. And that was an amazing talk. You like ran with it and you had so much information. That was amazing. I love it.
Yeah, I do a lot of rambling.
Sometimes that's the best kind. That's okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So,
good night, y'all.
Have a good day.